In Mathcad, you can create a histogram, which is a graph that measures the frequency of a variable within a series of intervals like you see here on the screen. And to do that, you are going to use the histogram function. Let's jump to a new worksheet to see how to do that. So here I am in my worksheet. I'm going to start off by creating my origin variable just because I want my indices for my data to start with the number 1 instead of 0. Okay, so first thing I need to do is create some data. So I'm going to generate some random numbers for my histogram. So let me make a range variable, and I'm going to have it go from a value of 1. And then if I hit the period key twice on the keyboard, this will turn this into a range variable. Let's go up to a maximum value of 100. That's good. Now let me create my vector of data. So I'm going to create a variable called samples, and then I will use this range variable as the index for my matrix. If you don't know how to do that, you can go to the matrices and tables tab, and then from the drop down over here, it should be this one, the matrix index, and the keyboard shortcut is the left bracket. So I'll click on that. I'll use my range variable I, and then I'm going to make this equal to a function. And to make it equal to a function, you can use the definition operator, which is available from the operators drop down on the math tab. It's this one over here, and the keyboard shortcut is the colon. So anyhow, let's make that equal to, and we can use one of our truncation functions. If you go to the functions tab, we can go to all functions, and here are the ones for truncation and round off. So for example, you could use round, which takes 2 different arguments. There's also a floor function. I'm just going to use the floor function because it only needs 1 argument, which is whatever number you are going to round down. So I'll double click on floor, and then let's generate some random numbers. And if I go to the random numbers group, well, this function RND will return a uniformly distributed random number between 0 and whatever other number. So let's double click on that. Let's get some numbers between 0 and 100. So this is good. Now, if we want to see what our random numbers are, well, we can evaluate this. Let me go to a line and just choose samples equals. And there you can see all the different numbers that we generated for our data set, and they are random. All right, so now in order to generate a histogram, we need to create another variable, and it's going to use the histogram function. So to keep it simple, I'm going to call my new variable A, and this will be equal to, and I'll use the definition operator. That's the colon key on the keyboard. And now we're going to use the histogram function. That is available in the statistics group on the function tab. It's right over here. And the 2 arguments that you're going to pass to it are the number of intervals that you want and then the name of the data. So let's go ahead and select that. And I'm going to do 5 intervals. And the name of my data, once again, is samples. And so now I've got everything that I need in order to create my chart. And if you want to see what data is returned by the variable, well, let's just do A and then hit the equal sign. And you can see that there are 2 different columns in here. And so here's the center of the data. And then here we have the number of occurrences of it. And by the way, since I use a random number generator, if I go to the calculation tab and hit calculate, it's going to change the occurrence. So let me just choose, I'll use this data that I want to evaluate. Let me go to a new sheet. I'm just going to scroll down. First, I'm going to use the chart component. Then I'll use the XY plot. I actually find the chart component a little better for the histograms. So let's go to the math tab and chart component, insert chart component. And then I will right-click in the inputs area. Let's enter in our x-axis expression. And the name of my variable from the histogram function was just the letter A. I kept it nice and simple. And I need to use the first column of data from there. If you go to the Matrices Tables tab, and then our vector matrix operator, this is the column operator. This returns a column. The keyboard shortcut is Control-Shift-C. So I will select that. And we want to extract the first column. Once again, I set my origin variable to 1. If you don't set the origin, it'll have a value of 0. So again, just make sure you keep track of what your origin variable is. Okay, let's enter in our y-axis expression. And this is going to be equal to our A variable. And once again, we can go to vector matrix operators and use the matrix column operator. And this is going to be column 2. And then I'll click over here. And let's collapse the inputs area. Let's make this a little bit wider. And by default, we get this line graph. So let's start making some changes to it. Let me see, I can close my functions. I don't need that. I will double click on the chart in order to get to the chart editor. And let's see, the first thing that we want to do is change this to columns. So I will click on the 1 tab, which is for the data. And let's go to setup. And instead of scatter line area, from the dropdown, we can change to columns. You can see that these columns are pretty narrow in here. The other thing that you want to change pretty early on is to change the y-axis, because we can see that we're not even getting any data over here, and that's because of the scaling. Let's go to the y-axis. By the way, I'm going to be jumping around in here for setting this up. Let's see, let's go to the setup, and let's do a user-defined range. And let's do from a value of 0 to a maximum of 30 should be good for this one. And the number of intervals, let's just do 6. So we have them nice and even by 5s. Just want to make sure we have decimals with no places out there. So that's good for the y-axis. Let's fix the x-axis. And for the x-axis, my number should be between 0 and 100, which means that my histogram column should be centered on 10, 30, 50, 70, and 90. So let's do a user-defined range. So for the setup, let's use minimum of 10, maximum of 90. I like how it picked that automatically. And let's just do 5 steps. Might be 4. Nope, let's do 4 steps. There we go. And you'll notice that the actual columns themselves are a little shifted in here based on the values returned by the histogram, because again, we've got a random distribution between 0 and 100. Yeah, that's what I set up initially. Okay, let's see some other things to change. Right now, these columns are really narrow. Typically in a histogram, you have wide columns. And so to fix that, we can go to our data and then the styles tab. And here we have the weight. And let's use a really big number like 100. If I type in 100, it's going to go to the default minimum value, or excuse me, the default maximum value of 80. I don't want to have any corners in my columns. Let's change that to 0. And let's make this nice and bright. Let's use red and red for that. And it looks good in the preview. If I close out of here, you can see that it is not as wide as I would like it to be. That's one reason that I prefer the XY plot for this. So let's make an XY plot. So let me click on the worksheet. Let's go to the plots tab. We're going to insert a plot, and it's going to be an XY plot. Let's make it really wide. And then for the y-axis, this is going to be that A variable. And we will go to our Matrices Tables tab. Let's go to the vector matrix operators and the matrix column operator. And on the y-axis, we're going to have the second column of our matrix. And then on the x-axis, this is going to be A. This time I'll use the keyboard shortcut, Control, Shift, and the C. And this is going to be column 1. And let's click out of here. Once again, the default is that we are getting our line graph. So let's go to the Plots tab. We'll change the type. Oops, let's select it. We'll change the type to column trace. Hey, this is already starting to look good. Let's set, once again, I think a value of 30 will be good, seeing as we have 100 samples. And let's be sure to change the minimum value to 0. And it shifts it up. And let's see, let's do a value of 5 for the interval. That's good. So that's looking good on the x-axis. And let's do the same stuff on the y-axis. Let me set the maximum here to 90. Something like that. Let's change this. Let's see, 10. And change the interval to 30. There we go. This looks really good. And once again, I will select the plot. I'm going to hide the axis expressions. And so there we have our nice histogram created with the XY plot. So that's how you can generate a histogram using data in Mathcad.